Hello everyone, this is Balaji Ganapati here from Tata Consultancy Services.
My name is Jordan Crenshaw.
I'm the Director of Broadband and Spectrum Policy at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation.
My name is Caitlin Cadella-Lowe.
During the COVID-19 crisis, unfortunately, at least 18 million Americans, according to the Federal Communications Commission, lack access to broadband.
The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these existing inequities across the board, and the ripple effect of disconnection is felt in every facet of life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Digital Empowers event, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion by design. I'm Mark DeCourcy, the Senior Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I lead the Chamber's Corporate Citizenship Center. Now, our Digital Empowers journey began over 3 years ago with our partner, Tata Consultancy Services. When we first created this partnership, we wanted to put a spotlight on how technology can be a powerful force for good. And I think the pandemic has made it clear that without technology, we wouldn't be able to surmount the many challenges that faced us in the schools, in the workplace, and in communities around the world. At the Chamber Foundation, we believe technology can be a great equalizer, but for it to be truly empowering, it must be built on an equitable foundation. That's why we're gathered here today, to hear from some of the greatest partnerships, programs, and organizations that are using technology in a truly remarkable way to create equal opportunity for all. I'm excited today to be joined by our partner, Balaji Ganapathy. Balaji serves as the Global Head of CSR and Corporate Social Responsibility Officer at Tata Consultancy Services. He'll be able to tell you more about today's program and why this issue is particularly important to the Digital Empowers campaign. Please join me in welcoming Balaji.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome all of you to today's discussion of Digital Empowers. Since its very beginning, Digital Empowers has had a very clear purpose and mission. We want to leverage this as a platform, as a convening, to raise the level of awareness of digital technologies and social issues and explore those at the same time. We want to explore the art of the possible so that we are looking for solutions to the issues that we are identifying and using technology as a lever to really leapfrog innovation for society. And the third is to foster cross-sector partnerships, bring people and organizations together that have common interests, and along with the common understanding and the art of the possible, can move this needle forward. And by God, have we moved the needle forward in the last 3 years? We have had over 3,000 of you, experts from across sectors, whether it is technology, business, citizenship, nonprofit, public policy, and government, coming together to address these issues and creating innovative insights that will serve humanity for years to come. But if we take a pause and look at where we are exactly a year from when this pandemic started ravaging the United States and creating havoc in our socioeconomic systems, our healthcare systems, our employment and economic systems, and more. And we are starting to rebound as a society and addressing these issues. But last year has also brought to the fore some of the underlying issues that has caused the inequities to grow over a period of time. I'm talking about racial justice and the social justice and the issues that we have dealt with, whether it is the killing, the mindless murders of African Americans and Black Americans, or whether it is the hate crimes that are being perpetuated towards the Asian American community in the recent past. So many of these are symptomatic of underlying challenges that remain unsolved. And as society, as people, we are taking bold steps to move forward. Organizations have a critical role to play in this whole journey. First of all, creating opportunities for people to communicate and discuss and share. And with that shared understanding, coming up with ideas that can really move the needle and make a difference. But we cannot stop until we address this problem head on. And today's discussion is going to cover this from three different perspectives. We're going to explore how technologies are enabling employers to foster innovative culture internally within their organizations. Every organization represents what is going on in society. And we need to make sure that people are feeling belonged in the organization and are able to be at their best, at their true self. We will also explore how the use of technology in fintech kind of environments is expanding equity and access to those who never had access to the capital that was needed to bring more equity before. And we are going to hear very innovative solutions in this space. We are also going to hear how DE&I can happen by design. And this is really important as we rebound from the crisis and the pandemic. New systems, new ways of work, new work cultures are being formed. And if we design it the right way, we will have a sustainable outcome into the future. Leaders can be a forefront of this action, as I mentioned. Organizations can be, but technology can also be a great lever. And that is what we believe at Digital Empowers, that the intersection of technology and social issues is where we are going to have the biggest impact. And this has been shown in the last year by how a pull forward of all of the digital the digital opportunities that exist and technology adoption has happened over the last year. We have explored a lot of these areas over the past 3 years, whether it is in potential to bridge the digital divide for marginalized groups, for indigenous communities, whether it is to support mental health, whether it is to address recidivism, whether it is to address well-being of communities and people. We have looked at so many of the use cases and examples in the past 3 years. And I'm excited about what we are going to have as a discussion today. Let us take this transformative step forward. We'll have a great conversation, engage, and look for opportunities to explore the art of the possible and foster greater partnerships. So with no further ado, let me introduce to you the first session for the day, which is on the importance of fostering inclusive workplace cultures. And to help address this, a TED Talk by Jessie Bridges, SVP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at EverFi.
Thank you so much. As I said, hi everyone. My name is Jessie Rainey Bridges, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at EverFi. Just a quick spot, EverFi is a social impact company that focuses on providing digital education on critical life skills to students in K-12, higher education, and employees in the workplace. And these critical skills span from topics like financial literacy, reading comprehension, diversity, equity, inclusion, building healthy relationships, mental well-being, or things like navigating the healthcare system. And in our solutions, we're aiming to create a safer, more equitable society by providing these life skills. And as we talk about DEI by design, I thought one of the best ways to do so is to use storytelling, one of the most effective designs to convey information. And so here we go. I was once asked by a CEO, what do we need to do to move DEI forward? And I pondered that for a moment, and at the risk of sounding like a fool because I don't know much about sports, I said, the formula is relatively simple. Create a culture where there are less fans in the stand and more players on the field. And then we had what felt like a 3-year staring contest before I explained further. See, most people will state that they value diversity. They agree that they want to feel included, and after the reckoning of 2020, they understand the complexity of equity a little more deeply. And that recognition, the agreement, the awareness are all equivalent to being fans in the stands of DEI progress. It requires that you show up and you give your support. But to truly affect change, to actively foster inclusive work cultures, more than fandom is needed. And progress then means that all of the people within your organization, employees and leaders alike, become players on the field. This sounds easy enough, yet it requires intention, commitment, and focus to achieve. So what then does it look like to be a quote unquote player on the field to foster an inclusive workplace? I generally like working in threes. So here it goes: the playbook, the push-up or the training regimen, and the positions. And I equate the playbook to the organizational strategy. One of the first components of the playbook is starting with the why, for all of you Simon Sinek fans out there. And many leaders recognize the role of innovation in furthering diversity, equity, and inclusion, as the headline of this event says. But let's also acknowledge the critical role that diversity plays in driving innovation. And for those who might still need convincing of the merits of having a diverse workforce, I offer you this. A recent study of PhD candidates in the science fields has shown that underrepresented groups generate scientific novelty or scientific innovation at a higher rate than their gender and racial majority counterparts. And so that innovation that we're all looking for exists in bringing together varying perspectives and creating the conditions in our work environments where people feel at liberty to experiment, to contribute, and to bring forward those novel ideas that can spark the technological breakthroughs that we're so desperately in need of. And so once you've established the why and your teams know you're committed, you can move into other areas of the playbook. And many DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, focus on community building, creating dialogues and other programmatic efforts, which are critical to engendering feelings of inclusion and belonging. These are the quote unquote plays that all employees can be a part of to be an ally and an advocate of inclusion. Now, the fuller playbook involves regular analysis, revision, and monitoring of the processes, the protocols, and the policies that drive an inclusive and equitable workplace culture. Those policies are talent acquisition, talent management, who's promoted, who gets advanced, who gets that stretch opportunity, and who's leaving the organization and at what rate. And so leveraging technology platforms that audit job descriptions for biased language, as an example, or connect you to candidate pools from underrepresented backgrounds, or leverage data visualization to track progress and nudging capabilities to check your biases in the hiring processes, those give those who are in decision-making positions the access and the information to quote unquote read the play and demonstrably be inclusive leaders. But players can't execute if they haven't practiced, if they don't know their position, or they haven't conditioned their muscles properly. And so this is where the push-up or the training regimen becomes incredibly important. Inclusive workplace cultures don't happen without intention. Let me say that again. Inclusive cultures don't happen without intention. Things like valuing difference, collaborating effectively across perspectives, taking note of and acting on our biases, and being receptive to views that are remarkably different from our own, these aren't natural occurrences. They're not how we're hardwired as human beings. And so these muscles, quote unquote, that need to be built, they have to happen over time with repetition and practice. Providing training at scale to everyone in your organization, not just your managers, not just your leaders, but to everyone. And doing so on multiple occasions will give your quote unquote players the confidence and the competence to put the skills of being inclusive allies to use. Research has shown that addressing topics like diversity, equity, and inclusion, harassment prevention, implicit bias, doing so through digital training provides learners the safety to practice these behaviors and to build knowledge in the safety of their own environment. It in some ways diffuses the angst around quote unquote getting it wrong that often hinders people's willingness to do anything at all. And so pairing that training with data-informed feedback, that players will be supported if they speak up, as an example, or they'll be supported if they interrupt disrespectful behaviors like microaggressions. That's a powerful combination to enhance a culture of inclusion. And there are also kind of point-in-time reminders like nudging capabilities and systems like learning management and applicant tracking platforms that remind players of the proper form, if you will. And this training regimen can be remarkably effective in supporting inclusive interpersonal interactions. It can also be helpful in coaching players how to integrate inclusion into their actual role or their position on the team. At the beginning of this year, I wrote a piece about the 2021 trends that we can expect to see in diversity, equity, inclusion. And one of those trends was framed as a mantra I often use in DEI work, which is diversity isn't a thing you do, it's how you do all things. And so once your playbook is established and the players are trained, the next P is about integrating DEI into the positions of the employees that play within the organization. Today's workforce, which is largely comprised, about 40% of today's workforce identify as being a part of the millennial generation. They have the expectation that work isn't just a place to earn a paycheck. It's an environment of doing purposeful work towards addressing larger societal issues. Employees want to know that the position they hold is connected to a larger why. And so having a clear vision of what your organization does to make life better, safer, easier, more fun, more just for everyone, and then communicating that vision and how it translates into how people do their jobs is a key employee engagement lever. And I'll give you an example. Within the education technology sector, school administrators are asking vendors to show how their teams are being intentional in the programs and the products and the services that are being provided. They're asking for demonstrable evidence of how you're mitigating biases and reducing stereotypes in the imagery and the design in the experience that learners are going through, and how they enhance equity and educational outcomes, as an example, for under-resourced communities. And so to answer that question, each quote unquote player in the organization needs to see a personal responsibility and have the tools to perform in the position in a culturally intelligent and inclusive manner. So to round out this story, I checked in with the same CEO earlier this year, and he was proud to report that not only had he started to incorporate the fans in the stands analogy into his regular communications, with attribution, of course, but that there's a dedication and a focus that the organization has started a new work stream, a new business opportunity on how to mitigate bias in their marketing materials. And on an internal win, they recently won the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index Award. And so they're doing the work inside their walls that's then manifesting into doing well within their business. And so as we approach the big, hairy, audacious goal of digital transformation and leveraging technology to address societal issues like the racial wealth gap, let's recognize that it requires everyone within your organization, not just senior leaders, not just HR, not just managers, and certainly not just the assigned DEI professional, to be active players on the field and not just fans in the stand. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that important guidance, Jessie, and good afternoon, everyone. Before we dive into the panel, I'm going to take a few minutes to do a little bit of context setting around the issue of DEI and FinTech by taking us up to that 100,000-foot perspective of the inequities in the system at play. And it's important to do so because there are an unfortunate set of realities in this country related to wealth, in terms of who has it, who doesn't, and why that is. We know that wealth provides financial agency over one's life. It gives individuals and families choice. Wealth provides economic security to take risks and shield against financial loss. But there are huge disparities in wealth that can be attributed in large part to the differences in access to wealth, access to intergenerational capital and finance, and access to financial resources. For example, the Asset Building Policy Network has done a lot of research and advocacy on income and wealth gaps. And when it comes to wealth in particular, defined as the sum of one's assets minus their debts, gaps in wealth between Hispanic and white households are at 88%. 88%. Black households trail closely behind with a gap of 90% compared to white households. For too long, racially marginalized and low-income individuals and families have been left behind in earning wealth to expand their economic opportunity and pass that along to the next generation. The last couple of recessions, in addition to the COVID pandemic, have only resulted in a widening of the racial wealth gap in this country. Now, financial literacy is often raised as the solution to the wealth gap and addressing inequities in our system. Financial literacy is crucial because it equips us with the knowledge and skills we need to actually manage money effectively. Without it, we lack a solid foundation for the financial decisions and actions that we take. But financial literacy on its own is not enough to build wealth and financially empower communities, which requires a systems-focused approach to resource access and opportunity. Especially critical for low and moderate income communities are financial tools and products that can maximize income and help families save. However, we find that these very same communities are targeted by more costly and predatory financial businesses. The growth of the fintech sector has been encouraging in terms of how it has innovated around new technologies, platforms, and business models that have allowed a great number of people to participate in the financial system. In fact, the sector set out to democratize access to finance by serving those who have been marginalized when it comes to our financial system. However, the lack of diversity in leadership, staff, customer base, branding, and marketing means that 20 years in, fintech has fallen into a similar trap to the financial services industry as a whole by increasing access for some, but not all. The demographic shifts in our country have significant implications for how financial institutions serve and engage with communities of color. If the financial services industry is the mechanism to create more fairness, then more people need to be participating in the system. At the end of the day, though, even if you don't see the moral imperative for an equitable approach to your business, you can understand the economic one. More customers leads to more capital. If a large segment of the population cannot participate, you're narrowing your customer base from the outset. That's why a thoughtful and strategic application of a DEI lens to the financial services industry is so promising. And it's exciting to be here today to discuss it and learn from these companies to understand what they have recognized as the business problem related to DEI and how they're actually seeking to address it. So we're joined today by three superstars in their own right. Ravi Devasetti is the CTO of Experian Consumer Information Services. Daniel Parama is the co-founder of SYWS. And Katie Neal is with Plaid as their policy outreach and advocacy lead. Welcome, all of you. We're going to start our conversation on DEI and fintech with the problems, because we know that before we can begin to have a thoughtful approach to solutions, it's key to assess root causes. Ravi, I'd like to begin with you. Many of us are familiar with Experian, for better or for worse, but it would be great if you could provide a brief overview of the business and share in just a couple of minutes how Experian has viewed the challenges it faces with respect to DEI. What challenge or set of challenges has Experian, chosen to address?
Absolutely. Thank you, Keda. First of all, for the sponsors providing me the opportunity as a technologist, as a CTO at Experian. We are very committed to address this issue, which is very critical, the digital equity and inclusion, especially in this pandemic. As you are saying, three things that we are committed is the awareness, financial awareness, access to the credit or the wealth for everybody, and action. At the end, action matters a lot. At Experian has been there for many years, many decades. We have 18,000 employees across the globe, 45 countries. We have a lot of data scientists and a lot of experience. We are very committed for the financial inclusion. The way we do in terms of awareness is if you go to Experian.com, we actively engage our consumers, our partners to educate, because the basic access happens is awareness, how you manage as a consumers, how your expenses are you on top of your credit issues. We educate them. You go to Twitter at Experian or Experian.com, there's a lot of education programs. Then we bring the technology to make sure that we provide the access to the data. My team very committed using advanced technology to make the data available faster, especially with the pandemic. The way the data is changing, people are waiting for their last paycheck, and if we have the regular models, the business models that taking long time, so my team has done amazing job. One of the things Keda pandemic enabled acceleration of the digital revolution that we have been looking. Some of the data availability for us, it used to take months. Now we are able to get into weeks and days, and that's because of the technology. We also partner with our own internal partners, business partners, but also reach out to groups like yours. And we also partner with Operation Hope and some industry standards to make sure that we can make the data available faster, fresher. While doing that, we also make sure that we don't introduce we make sure that there are no biases. We use artificial intelligence, machine learning, although it brings a lot of new techniques, but the explainability, I may be going technicality here, which is important, make sure that we don't compromise there. So very committed as a technologist, Experian invests heavily to make sure that we promote the awareness, access, and also make the action.
Great, Robbie. Thank you so much for that. Daniel, moving on to you. Can you share a bit about who SYWS is and how your company sees the challenge of a lack of DEI in the financial services sector?
There you go. Thank you, Keda, for introducing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Páramo. I am from Quito, Ecuador. I am the co-founder and chief operating officer here at Swiss. First, thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and Tata Consultancy Services for making this event happen. It's an honor to be here next to Katie from Plaid, Keda from Magnetar Capital, and Ravi from Experian. We're a fintech startup located in Dallas, Texas. We empower brands and banks to accelerate innovation and inclusion by embedding financial solutions into their platforms. Solutions like global payments, digital wallets, account receivables, accounts payables, tools, verifications, account opening, financial literacy, and more. What we like to call it is we are the Swiss Army knife of financial services. Since the early beginnings, our goal has always been to be inclusive, diverse, and to create equity in every instance and through every product that we make. Us being here is a testament how inclusive financial services are becoming. And we see a vast of challenges in the fintech industry, but here are two main ones that I would like to touch during this. The first one is that there's no enough fintech support for BIPOC community banks. From a study that I learned recently, is that from the 5,000 US banks that exist today, only 4,000 of those banks support banks. That's less than 1%. And second, that I want to touch about is financial literacy. It's not very accessible for minority business owners. Many don't know how to open a business or file the taxes, or why at every transaction there's a 3% charge that takes away from their sale. Just quick on how we address these challenges is by partnering with mission-centric nonprofit organizations and financial institutions that are serving these communities, but also our products help banks, small businesses have a closer connection, a better user interface, and a better experience around money. All this helps increase the financial literacy. Back to you, Keda.
Thanks so much, Daniel. And my apologies to you for spelling out what I thought was an acronym, SWISS. Thank you. Swiss Army knife. That makes complete sense. Thanks again for that. And finally, Katie, I know that Plaid has done a lot of thinking on this and actually been quite public with articulating the problem of inequities in fintech as well as advocating for solutions. We'll get to the solutions momentarily, but can you spend a couple of minutes sharing who Plaid is and how Plaid views the challenges in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think you set up the problem statement very, very nicely. So Plaid is a financial technology company. We connect about 11,000 banks to about 4,500 different fintech apps. So if you've ever used Venmo, Betterment, or Acorns, you'll have seen Plaid's logo saying Venmo uses Plaid to connect to your bank account. And so we are actually enabling consumers to share their financial data, which has been traditionally housed in banks, with entities outside of a bank. And before the fintech ecosystem erupted 10 years ago, is sort of when the changes started happening. Consumers were just banking at one place. They had all their data stored there. They were getting loans from there. They weren't pulling in alternative data in order to get better access to credit, which Experian just touched on a little bit. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there in the fintech ecosystem. I do think you highlighted that there's also a lot of problems there, right? It looks a lot like the traditional financial services ecosystem today. And so one of the things that Plaid is thinking a lot about is how do we build the future, and so that it's much more inclusive and is empowering the sort of use cases that we envision when we think about fintech, which is better access to credit, better, automated savings, faster access to earned wages, et cetera. And so there's a few different initiatives I'd love to talk more deeply about that we've engaged in, but we've recently launched FinRise, which is an incubator, and it's focused on BIPOC founders. And it's in the very early stages of when a company is being created is when we're recruiting them. We found that you quoted some great stats at the beginning, but I'm just going to give a little bit more. So recently we found that a diversity VC found that Black founders make up just 1% of those who receive venture capital funding, with Latino, Middle Eastern, and Asian founders constituting 1.8, 2.8, and 17.7% of those who receive funding, respectively. So how are we building a more inclusive ecosystem if our ecosystem isn't even representative of the ecosystem that exists in the United States today? And so we launched FinRise. I got over 100 applicants from BIPOC founders, and we actually just announced our inaugural cohort yesterday, and we're really excited to support these founders. We've built an entire incubation program for them. It involves workshops, access to venture capital, and access to a dedicated support team from Plaid, as well as outside partners like Flourish Ventures and Village Capital. And we've seen just huge interest from the ecosystem. And how do we do this too? How do we build this internally and start thinking about like the world we want to live in versus the world we live in today? And so that's just one of the things that we're doing, but looking forward to talking more.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Katie. And we're going to go now and try to dig a little bit deeper into your company's approaches to addressing the problems that you all just set out in wonderfully helpful ways. So there may be internal approaches to DEI, external facing approaches, or both. Katie, I'd love to kind of begin where we just left off to learn a little bit more about some of the key DEI strategies that Plaid has employed. I think it would be very helpful for the audience to understand how you've approached those.
So we have a few internal programs. We have Plaid community groups, we have LGBTQ groups, we have Women Plus, and we have Plaids of Color. And all these groups are meant to organize and highlight different voices at Plaid in order to advocate for areas that we might be lacking in or that we need more support in. And the goal is to make it not just anyone's person to advocate for themselves or to put the burden on someone who is feeling underrepresented at Plaid. The goal is for everyone at Plaid to be an ally to each other and all advocate together. Another thing that we have started doing in the past couple of years, we've developed product inclusion principles. And this is something I think I would encourage every company to think about doing. So we developed 3 principles, and they are maximize access for all, proactively recognize and prevent bias, and think through outcomes. And so we want all of our products to always be engaging in those 3 principles. And to hold ourselves accountable to those, we're establishing recurring inclusion reviews for each of our products, in which we ask ourselves questions like, how does this product maximize access across institutions, developers, and consumers? How could and does bias appear in the development of this product? And then we use that data to determine concrete next steps to increase product inclusivity. We ran our first inclusion review at the end of last year, and in 2021, we rolled them out to all of Plaid's product portfolio. And that's something I would encourage every company to think about when they're building products and when they're even just auditing current products out there that might have been designed with some biases in place. Those are a few things that we're doing, as I mentioned, FinRise, which is the thing that I'm the most excited about. So happy to talk more about that, but want to give some others time as well.
Such important work, Katie, and it's exciting to hear how Plaid is really leading on that. Daniel, how about you? Can you share maybe a highlight or two of some of the work that Swiss is focused on when it comes to thinking about DEI, whether it's internal efforts, externally with strategic partners, or otherwise?
Of course, thank you. So what we try to do at Swiss is to look very well at our partnerships that we're making. And as an example, during April or May 2020, when the whole pandemic started to happen and the PPP loan was about to go out, we did two things. First, we partnered with a nonprofit organization like the Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce and the True Fund Financial Services, which their mission is to support BIPOC communities. And second, we built in a matter of 2 weeks, we built a PPP web application called My Cares Act, which it's a free application. Any small business or entrepreneur can log in and fill out one application. That application gets distributed to various different banks, and these reduce the double spending, any fraud or time from banks and small businesses. Just to give some data on that, with these partnerships and with this tool, we were able to help more than 80 small businesses get around 4.5 million on the payment protection program. Since then, we partnered with Comerica Bank and AT&T to do a Black Business Bootcamp. Additionally, we have partnered with the African American Credit Union Coalition and FinTech Equality Coalition to give them some insights on FinTech, on how we can support BIPC communities as well. On our products, we're working with banks on the southern Dallas area to provide accounts payable and accounts receivables tools for small businesses. Through these efforts as well, we created a tool assessment that can foster further inclusion on financial literacy. We're working as well with loan funds on embedded deposit accounts that will increase the capacity to give small cap loans to these small businesses. Back to you, Kata.
Thank you so much. Ravi, we're running a little bit low on time. I want to make sure I get at least one other question out to you all, but hoping that you can share maybe one or two tools that Experience is utilized as a way to address some of the challenges of inequity.
Yeah, I'll go fast, but as Katie and Swiss mentioned, we have our own employee resource groups. We representing all the sectors. We have a Caribou employee resource group that represents the Black community, Hispanic, and Asian, and we want to do our own employee resource groups participate in the product ideas. We don't want to just do from the compliance or audit part of it. We want to put that part of our core DNA. We do quarterly hackathons, so that way people participate, because if we have the diversity representing internally, it also represents the products. A couple of products I would highlight is Clarity is an acquisition where we wanted to get alternate data that provides the payday loans, unbanked population, so that way we can get credit access to them. The other product, everybody must know, Boost. If you go to Experian.com, you could boost your score by adding recurring payments like telcos, utilities. Even if you do Netflix, we catch them because the credit score basically computes based on how trustworthy, how you are repeating the payments, right? And we can get those patterns through the Boost. So it is a consumer consent and consumer driven great product that came from Experian that enables the financial inclusion.
Fabulous. Very, very interesting stuff and hard work indeed. Let me go to one question, because that's about what we have time for. Maybe each of you, we can do a little quick round robin. Each of you spend 30 seconds or so responding. So the financial services industry, as we know, has a real diversity problem and has had one since its beginnings. I actually heard on an interview with Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell this morning that of the 417 economists on the board, only 2 are Black. As we know, the Federal Reserve sets monetary policy for the US and regulates banks. When we think about fintech, how does the fintech industry ensure that it continues to innovate and really lead in the area of DEI? Ravi, why don't we start quickly with you?
Yeah, I'm going to be fast. It is very important for us. We partner with fintech. We recruited our chief diversity officer, Will Lewis, and he participates in the products when we work with the fintechs to make sure that whatever the products, whatever the APIs, whatever the models that we are doing, even at the fintech level, we make a difference. So that's just one example. There are many things that we do constantly work with our partners to make sure that fintechs are not using the traditional approaches, but revolutionary approaches to solve this problem.
Great. Let's keep going around. Katie, how about you?
So I think the part of the problem is, right, is products that are built by people for other people often represent the biases and the influences of the founders, et cetera. And so when we launched FinRise, we thought about that. There's a lot of white male founders, and that's something we noted and want to change. And I'm going to tell you about 2 companies that are in our fintech, that are in our FinRise cohort, that I think are going to change fintech for everyone, but particularly for communities of color. So one is GuideFi. They're developing financial wellness marketplace, connecting communities of color to vetted, culturally attuned financial advisors. Another is Of Color, and it's an enterprise financial wellness platform for employees of color, including personalized PFM and loans that will allow them to maximize their 401k contribution. So this is where we think the future of fintech is going. We've seen a lot of, as you pointed out, a lot of the more traditional financial service biases in the past 10 years. But once we start allowing more diverse founders access to funding and access to resources that you pointed out are missing today, we're going to start seeing more products that represent more communities. And I think that everyone should be thinking about, who they're supporting and how they're supporting them. And we're doing that now. And, wish we had done it 10 years ago, but we're starting today and hopefully building the future.
Love it. Thank you so much for that and for the names of those companies and lifting them up here. Daniel, anything to add?
Yeah, actually, what Jesse Bridge said, every inclusion starts with intention. And right now, every product has to be intentionally thinking about it. Think about inclusion, external, but also internal, right? Our employees, our people, right, has to have a voice, has to be included in different discussions. And like Katie said, all these products are being made right now, are being biased by the founders. So, bravo to Plaid to creating this program. They're going to help BIPOC founders. And, I think the future we'll see more products being more inclusive, diverse, and with more equity.
Agreed. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you all. The panel has shared some really promising DEI practices in the form of product design, internal culture and climate, customer engagement, recruitment and retention, and so on. These companies certainly recognize that by being inclusive, they will be better positioned to attract talent, tap into new markets, and create innovative products. Continuing with this momentum to bring marginalized consumers into the mainstream financial system and increase access to the right tools is not just the right approach to take, it's the only approach that will lead to greater financial health and wealth for all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Hi. Honored to speak today about the unintended impact of remote work on critical communication. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for making this event a reality. So time and again, we've seen the studies about how critical conversations are to the workplace. Conversations spur creative thinking, they grow connections, they build rapport, and they drive productivity. In the workplace, as well as in our personal lives, our effectiveness is directly tied to our willingness to broach difficult and sensitive topics, such as the following: talking to a teammate about not pulling their weight, telling someone their presentation wasn't clear or effective, serious conversations around performance or lack of urgency, communicating difficult news around budget cuts and cancellation of plans, having a talent calibration conversation where there may be unconscious bias, or maybe despite their best intentions, someone is committing microaggressions and it's having a big negative impact on the team, whether it's intended or not. So we know how important these conversations are. There are so many books out there ranging from Crucial Conversations to Radical Candor addressing this topic. And the existence of these books and these frameworks are evidence of just how difficult it is to have really productive conversation in the workplace. I think much of this can be boiled down to the idea of caring personally and challenging directly, to take a note from Radical Candor. If you think about, those 4 different quadrants that Radical Candor presents, and avoiding manipulative insincerity and obnoxious aggression and being kind and candid. In many cases, we know what we have to do. It's just really, really, really hard to do it. According to a report from Bravely, 70% of employees avoid difficult conversations with their boss or their colleagues. And complicating all this is the rise in remote work, which has pushed a lot of these difficult conversations to new channels like Zoom. And of course, there's been a lot of conversation about how remote work is paving the way for greater access to the workplace with positive implications for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But at the same time, there's a question of whether we can rise to the challenge of having these conversations on a platform like Zoom in the first place. So to investigate this, I came across an article in Harvard Business Review, which breaks productive conversations down into 6 different elements. And in a moment, we'll talk about what remote work means for all this. There's safety, the ability to make another person feel safe so that they can express how they really feel in a conversation. There's focus, being present and signaling that presentness to the other person. There's connection and comprehension, tracking to the other person's level of understanding and adjusting where necessary. There's whole body communication, using everything that we have to convey what we mean. There's the emotional aspect of a conversation, reading between the lines for what's unspoken as well as directly stated. And then usually in a business conversation, whether it's a brainstorming session or a negotiation, there's some element of goal attainment here. Reaching a conclusion requires, deep agreement on both sides of the equation. So remote communication challenges every single aspect of these productive conversations. Safety. On Zoom, it's hard to read the other person, so we don't necessarily know what the boundaries of the conversation are. Focus. We're being asked to focus on a very small screen, and many of us may be tempted to multitask or to go off camera. Connection, comprehension. To really listen actively, you have to read the other person and know when to drop in those clarifying questions. When you have to confirm, restate, paraphrase. It can be hard to get a sense of that. And then whole body communication. We're just limited in the surface area through which we can communicate on Zoom. And then emotions, forget about emotions. A lot of us are struggling with basic information transfer when it comes to communication in remote work. It can really raise the bar as far as organization and the comprehension of content is concerned. We're not all in a room with a whiteboard. We can't see everything. And then when it comes to goal attainment, I think it can be really difficult for people to know whether agreements actually reached in a conversation on Zoom. Politically, people may be unsure of whether a decision was truly reached in people's hearts or whether it was simply agreed upon superficially because the meeting came to an end. A lot of the signals that we have simply aren't there. So to address these and other questions, Mersion conducted a dual survey of 400 full-time employees and 250 full-time managers at companies with at least 2,500 employees to explore how this shift in a more distributed workforce has changed how employees communicate. So very quickly, who is Mersion and why do we care about this? Well, we are a VR for emotional intelligence company. So we use simulations to power experiential learning for essential human skills like leadership, communication, and empathy. Simulations replicate the qualities of a real experience. So they're safe enough so that learners can make mistakes, can try out new strategies, new tactics. They're dangerous enough to recreate the stress of the encounter so that learners can overcome that stress and be their best self when it really matters. So bottom line, we're not trying to trick you, we're not trying to break you or even to make you fail. We're just trying to recreate that stress so that you can trust yourself and be your best self when it really matters. So back to the survey, how are people responding? Well, 70% of employees and 55% of managers say they are avoiding having difficult conversations. Only 35% of managers reported conducting an employee review since moving to remote work. This is a big problem because as much as many people despise performance reviews, they do legitimize work. They align managers, employees, and help drive professional development. Now, even more startling, just 20% of managers and 12% of employees said they have had a conversation with a colleague about issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in one of the most charged atmospheres around these issues in recent memory. So about this specifically, here are a few more eye-opening stats. 68% of managers said they have had an informal conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, just 39% of employees said they have had. So there's some disconnect going on there. And of those who actually had conversations, 44% of managers said they had them via email. Well, it's hard to imagine a medium less suited for difficult conversations. So some of the potential solutions out there. Training all managers to be facilitators of these conversations. Positive behaviors and cultural change can often ripple out from these leaders of teams in the organization. Having more frequent pulse checks with open-ended qualitative responses accepted. Having structured Slack channels is something that we've implemented, allowing people to share their voice via different modalities, encouraging back channeling and a live conversation on Zoom. So the idea here is that if people have a foundation and a common language and they're getting all this validation through the back channeling, they'll be more likely to express themselves in a live interaction. And we get to a deeper place when we start to have that conversation in the first place. I also think that simply having more frequent positive interactions is a great place to start. There's a lot of research out there, and I read this article recently from John Mackey. He's the big advocate for conscious capitalism, that a person can't accept negative or constructive feedback from someone that they don't already have a positive personal relationship with. So it's not small talk. It's the foundation of all the really substantial conversation that we have in the workplace. And then simply making performance reviews a priority, putting a stake in the ground, and having them continually in a micro and gamified way through one of the many platforms out there. Our company uses Culture Amp. I also think that a lot of this comes down to proper meeting facilitation, which is, to me, an essential skill for managers. The ability to draw diverse perspectives, to weave them together, to frame the conversation, know when to parking lot certain items, how to return to them, how to steer the conversation, knowing when to speak up, stand back, and encourage others to do the same, and do this all within the constraints of a meeting. It's what we're all about here at Mersion, helping people develop those social instincts, that subtle and often under-recognized set of skills that makes a person really effective in the workplace. What I'm really interested in personally is how these skills intersect with power dynamics, like who feels legitimate, who doesn't, whose voice gets heard, who struggles to be seen, to speak and to be seen, who feels that magic alignment that creates presence and influence, and how we can give everyone access to these powerful feelings that can make work a deep joy. Because there are so many amazing opportunities that remote work and remote communication can bring to the table. More flexibility for workers, the ability to recruit far and wide and to find the right talent, the capacity to surface opinions and the perspectives of a more diverse workforce that is able to be present physically in an office. So I believe that if we can practice these skills, confront the awkward, messy reality head on, we can unleash some of the transformative possibilities of this new world that we live in. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers for their insights and incredible efforts to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in all areas of life. Your work is addressing the root causes of inequality, creating a level playing field, and bringing hope and opportunity to many. We started our Digital Empowers partnership with a firm belief in the power of technology to solve our most pressing challenges. And I think the pandemic and the events of 2020 through today have proven us right. Technology-driven solutions have helped save lives, kept businesses from being closed, and helped reopen more schools. And all of this allowed us to remain agile in an ever-changing world. As we prepare for a return to normalcy, these conversations and partnerships to build a more equitable future become even more important. So thank you for being here today, for taking a step to help create the future. It's been a distinct honor to be part of the Digital Empowers campaign and to provide a platform for social innovators like yourselves to come together and to learn as we all drive for more meaningful change in society. Balaji, this partnership has been so beyond what we could have expected when we first set out. Thank you for your guidance and for your leadership, and we're excited to see what comes next.
Thank you so much, Mark. What an insightful conversation we have had today. Incredible speakers and engagement from all of you. Thank you for that. Through Digital Empowers in these past years, we have learned and continue to see that disruptive technologies are potentially some of the most powerful forces to drive transformative change and create positive social impact. We truly believe that. It is the potential of technology that helps us realize perhaps that some of the biggest problems in the world are actually opportunities for us to think outside the box and actualize change. Keeping this in mind, we have seen an increased need coming from all of you for these conversations to continue and grow across regions and countries. We will continue to work with the Chamber and the Chamber Foundation to explore this mission, but we are also expanding our partnerships to ensure that we are where you are at and we can bring the conversation to the issues and the places where you are, both topical and geographic. With this broader reach in mind, I'm happy to share with you that next on the horizon is a Global Educator Roundtable, which will happen on the April 22nd, which will have educators who are in the forefront from US, Canada, UK, and Mexico. And they are going to talk about teaching in the era of COVID and how virtual instruction and remote learning is happening in today's schools and how these learnings can be used to apply the insights and transform the future of education. Then on May 18th, in collaboration with the British American business, we will be looking at equity in healthcare from a US and United Kingdom's perspective and use that learnings and insights on how we can build more inclusive healthcare systems using technology. Over the next year and the years ahead, Digital Empowers will continue to uncover these opportunities, break the silos that exist in terms of access to technology on the one hand and knowledge of how to utilize them on the other hand to create powerful solutions. And you are the glue that holds all of this together. So let me invite you to continue to participate in these programs here on. And to learn more about this, you can check out us.digitalempowers.org, where all of the forums that have happened thus far and papers and insights and articles are available. Thank you all for being part of today's journey. And I invite you to be part of the future journey of Digital Empowers. Have a good rest of the day.